Nancy Cartwright wants to give us a wake-up call, a reality check about the relation between science and policy. In fact, it's a very general wake-up call about the relationship between scientific knowledge and its application. She first wants to point out that the perspective of the producer of scientific knowledge and the perspective of the user of scientific knowledge are importantly different. Let me give you an example. Consider the bike helmet. Why do I have one? I believe in the science. There's a study in the British Medical Journal that says that bikers who wear helmets have fewer head injuries than those who don't. Stands to reason, straightforward. This is a good helmet. I mean, it does its job. However, in jurisdictions where bike helmets have been made a matter of law, have not shown an increase or a decrease in head injuries. And in fact, in some cases, they actually showed more. How could that be? I mean, the science was clear, repeatable. What's going on here? So Cartwright points out confounding factors, she calls them, okay? So we go back and we look at the original scientific study, and we find, first of all, that the people who were wearing helmets tended to be safer riders, okay? They also found that those people who wore helmets and those safer riders, they tended to be in less severe accidents, okay? Probably more conservative riders. And they also found out that that group tended to be wealthier and predominantly white, okay? So speculation is that that wasn't a representative sample in some sense, but it might have been a representative sample. It might have turned out that the people that were in the original study were representative of the larger people in the larger population. It could have been even better. It could have been it turned out that this minor study did not reflect the true benefit of helmets, and helmets might have turned out to be much better, but they didn't, okay? So, other confounders. Since the original study, it turns out there are more cars on the road, more traffic. There's also, the cars that are on the road are larger and heavier, give bigger impact, and they're traveling faster on average. Okay, so it might be a factor. Now, here's a really interesting part of it. So drivers apparently are less cautious with helmeted bike riders. Okay, so if they see somebody with a helmet, they're not going to be quite so cautious because this thing is not a bigger risk. Riders, likewise, tend to be a little riskier riders if they have a helmet on. Why? Less risk, right? Seems to make sense. So there's a sort of a feedback effect here in terms of the perception of risk and the behavior of the people that certainly wasn't there in the science, the original science of the helmets. So there's this, this false sense of security that people might get from wearing helmets. We didn't take that into account. Okay, that's a confounding factor. The main lesson seems to be that the perspective of the producer of scientific knowledge and the perspective of the user of scientific knowledge are importantly different. So as users, we need to take these into account, what Nancy calls confounding factors. And in a similar vein, possible unintended consequences of implementing a particular policy that we might have reasoned on the basis of the simple science and a naive view of the environment in which we were going to implement it. So again, a practical lesson is that we need to incorporate our understanding of these confounding factors and possible unintended consequences into the causal model that we create when we're designing our policy and figuring out what the consequences of that policy are going to be. It's fairly straightforward. But there's a deeper lesson in all this about the relationship between science and policy, between science and application, between science and problem solving. I'll deal with this in the next video.